his spirit is such an amazing, wonderful spirit. It's been through so much, and he just brings so much love and joy with him. And he's going to tell you his story. So please give a warm welcome for Jeff Olsen.
Let's see if the microphone works. I was teasing, I have this problem everywhere I go, that the electronics shut out. The IT guys at work, really find it interesting. I might just turn it off and step over here.
Yeah.
So we can. Is that better?
Yeah.
I don't like hiding behind here, but I'd rather you hear me than not.
We can still see you.
Did I mention electronics don't like me? Yeah, the IT guys at work just hate it. I mean, I'll call and they'll say, "Oh, it's you again?" You know, just turn it off and leave the office. Just go away. I can't wear a watch. They won't work, and crazy things happen. But it's such a pleasure and an honor to be here and share and spend time. I love Chicago. I used to come out here for business, and there's an energy in the city that's just, it's vibrant, and it's ancient, and it's invigorating, and it's fun. And Diane's been a wonderful host, and you know, watching us go up the stairs together is interesting. We went to this beautiful Greektown restaurant Friday night, and they took us to the very top, you know. And I almost had to chuckle as we made our way up the stairs, and I was still worse than her, but I'm bad enough. But anyway, it was fun. I wanted to start out and just talk about who I am. I mean, it's okay if I just give you some personal background, because a couple of the guys came up and they said, "You know, it's funny, you're just a normal guy." And I said, "I really am just a normal guy." You know, people have read the book, or they'll hear that I'm an experiencer, and you know, I don't know what they expect, but it's they think I'm going to come in and read their mind or something, and I really don't do that. I do have impressions all the time. And since my experience, it has opened up a segue of communication, or a conduit, so to speak. But I grew up about as normal as anyone could grow up. I did have, my parents divorced when I was young, which is becoming normal, right? I mean, they divorced when I was young. And it created some insecurity in me, I suppose, because I didn't know how to trust that. I didn't know if everything that was meant to be okay was going to be as I thought it would look. But as a result of that, me and my brothers became very, very close. I was only 4 years old when the divorce happened, and I had a brother that was 3 years older than me, so he was 7, and then I had a brother that was just 18 months younger than me. And we bonded very tightly because his mom, you know, left, and we, you know, Mom had to go to work, and we would go to school, and we really bonded. We became very, very close. And then as Mom remarried, which was 7 years after the fact, I spent my early life with Mom. And Dad was there every weekend. Dad was he had a big ranch and a dairy farm up in Charleston, Utah. Anybody ever heard of Charleston, Utah? Somebody's heard of Charleston, Utah. You get the hat. People in Utah don't know where Charleston, Utah. I think the population was like 68 or something. It's a little teeny mountain town. It's beautiful. They call it Little Switzerland. It's near Park City. Anybody heard of Park City? Okay. All right. So I grew up near Park City. And my dad had a dairy farm and a ranch there, and we would go every weekend when I was with my mom with my dad. So we were very, you know, they kept it together. They were really bright as parents. You know, my father had fallen in love with another woman, and he left my mom, and she could have been really angry and ugly about it. But she always honored my father as my father. You know, she said, "Your father's a good man. You know, he's your dad." I mean, and she was really good about that. And my father, even now that he's entering into his 80s, And he's single. He's been through several marriages, but he's single now, and he cries and said, "I should have stuck with your mom." You know, what was I thinking? And, but his mom remarried, and my older brother, who was then coming up on about 15, he had been the man of the house. It was uncomfortable for him. He said, let's go and live with Dad. Let's leave. But he was emphatic that the brothers stick together, that the three of us stick together. And we did. We went to live with my dad full time on the farm, and then Mom would get weekends or vacations or whatever. But we had a very rough and tumble and wonderful childhood. Three brothers working on a big farm and ranch with a single father. He used to call it Bonanza. He was like Bonanza. And we did. We had horses and cows, and I was on the rodeo team, and we'd become very athletic. I mean, what I loved was I wrestled. I played football. And wrestling at Wasatch High School, where I grew up, is something like wrestling at, Iowa University. I mean, wrestling was not a sport at Wasatch High, it was a religion. I mean, it was very, very intense, and I had this ongoing battle between the wrestling coach and the football coach, because I was at that strange place of about 205 pounds or something. And the wrestling coach wanted me to wrestle 185, and the football coach wanted me to be 225. And anyway, I finally ended up just sticking with football because, quite honestly, it was easier. I liked going really hard for 8 seconds and then resting for 25. That was a little bit better than a whole 2-minute period of wrestling. But it worked out really well, and it actually, I got a scholarship to Utah State. And that's where I did my school. And in college, as most people do, I mean, I fell head over heels, stupid, in love. And met a girl there named Tamara, beautiful woman, and very bright. She was on a full scholarship, and here I was the dumb jock, and yet I wasn't necessarily dumb. I was studying art. My desire was to be an artist. I wanted to paint and create things, and it was very hard to juggle that and honor an athletic scholarship, because I had to be in the weight room at 6, and then breakfast was at 7:30, and then class started, and then taping was at 1, and practice started at 2, and you would go from 2 to 6 at practice, and then you had team dinner from 6 to 7, and then you had team films from 8 to 9, and you had study hall from 9 to 10, and by the time I could start painting or potting or whatever I was going to do, most of that had to happen late into the night, and I would, go till 2 o'clock in the morning and grab 4 hours of sleep and get up and go to the weight room, and it wasn't working very well, so I tripped on to graphic design, which was easier. They had an advertising design core where I could sketch and draw fun ideas and campaigns and layouts, but I could do it very quickly, and it made it an easier transition. And that's what I still do today. I'm a creative director at an ad agency, and I love it. It's a good thing to do and still be creative and make a living, but I'm getting to that point where I'm the old man of the office, and it's probably time to step down and start painting again. So life does come full circle, but as part of this college experience, falling in love. And I want to talk about that a little bit, because it was a strange thing. We were a bunch of guys, we went down to the girls' dormitories, and yet when Tamara came down the stairs, the first time I saw her, I didn't even know her name. I had never believed in love at first sight, but it absolutely just hit me. I knew. In fact, I knew in such a deep way that I saw her again and told one of my friends, that's the woman I'm going to marry. No, she was an attractive woman, but it was a deep, I knew. I mean, I just knew it was a remembering. And that was one of the first times I felt this, this spiritual thing, and she was a great influence in my life. Where I'd come from the farm and all brothers and all boys, she was the first soft thing since my mother that I really knew, and she was deeply spiritual as well, and she brought me into a spiritual realm that I had not experienced before either. I left for a while. What happened is in the spiritual awakening after meeting her, I became a devout Christian. I went on a church mission to Scotland, which was a beautiful country. I've always laughed. Chicago, I think I love because it reminds me of Glasgow, Scotland. I don't know why, but they just feel the same. Kind of rough towns and yet beautiful towns. But I left, and there's something I wanted to share about that. That's why I'm inserting that in here. Is we wrote letters to each other. We had to write letters, and then we wrote letters. It wasn't text, messages or emails. We literally had to sit down and write. And I would draw her funny little pictures, and this is what I'm experiencing, and here's the Scottish guy that hollered at me, and I couldn't understand a word he said. But we would write these letters. But there was an energy in literally sharing your heart. We had all the physical attraction of young lovers, but we were a world apart, and we had to communicate through words, and it almost felt as if you were putting energy, and she would send her energy back, and the post would come back and forth. And what ended up happening is we developed a relationship the whole 2 years I was gone, where I think we were far deeper in love than when I left. So I came back home, and we got married. Gosh, it was only about 4 or 5 months after I got home. I got home and we found out, wow, we're really in love. Let's just start planning the wedding and get on with things. And we did. And it was beautiful. And she was a school teacher. She was just graduating, and she taught high school. And I hurried and finished up my college as quick as I could and took a job at an ad agency. And life was beautiful. I mean, we were married for 3 years and just enjoyed it. We just enjoyed being together, being with each other. We built our first little house, from the ground up, and that was exciting. And then we had our first son, 3 years into our marriage, Spencer. And he's now 22 years old and 6'4", and he lives down in California right now. But he was such a joy to bring this little boy into the world, and he was just, gosh, he had my nose and he had his mom's eyes, and it was just, it was such a joy. And so Tamara said, gosh, let's have another one, let's have more children. And yet she'd had some complications through the pregnancy and with the delivery, and she had a very hard time getting pregnant again. I mean, I was more than happy to keep trying. That was half the fun. But she wasn't getting pregnant. So we went. Spencer was 6 years old by the time Griffin came, and Griffin was our second son. And he was all boy. I mean, Spencer has turned out looking like his mother and their side of the family. He's tall and angular and thin. Griffin was more like me. He was just a chunk of boy, and we had to fight him. It took both of us to hold him down just to diaper him, I mean, he'd be kicking and screaming, and always in fun. I mean, he was always a very fun, playful kid. But we had this beautiful little family. We had just built our dream home. My career had taken off, and we built a beautiful house up in the foothills of the Rocky Mountains overlooking the Great Salt Lake. So we almost looked like ocean view, but living in the alpine, tree line there. And I remember at one point sitting out on the deck of our new house, and it was one of those spiritual moments again. In fact, I was out there kind of wiping tears of gratitude, just thinking, wow, how did I get so lucky? I could hear the family in the house. I was watching the sunset down over the lake, and I was filled with gratitude. It's like I've really been lucky, and I felt it. And it was about that time that Spencer, who at that point was just a little kid, but he climbed up on my lap, and he brought me licorice whips. He had licorice whips in his hands, and sat there and ate these licorice whips. And it was a profound moment that I drew upon as the story goes on. But it was about that point. We'd been married for 10 years. And we were going to take a family trip down to southern Utah, down to the Red Rocks and Arches and all the beautiful things you see, which we're really lucky because we can live in the Alpine mountains and drive for about 3.5 hours and be in the red rocks of the desert, so that the landscape changes very drastically in a short geographic distance. And we packed up the car and went down. What we were doing is, Tamara's grandfather had gotten Alzheimer's disease, and it was really getting bad. And her mom and dad were staying down there to look after him. He was in a care center. And they told us, you know, you better come see Grandpa. He's not doing well. He won't remember who you are. You know, he's having a hard time even recognizing his own wife, and he's lashing out at the staff at the care center. And it was sad, because he'd been, in his life, he was this beautiful, charming man. He sang tenor at a group, and he would dance, and he worked hard, and he had slipped very fast into this degenerative, you know, he just didn't even know what was going on. Well, the interesting thing is we took the trip down, and we went and visited Grandpa. And for whatever reason, he was magnificent. He remembered us with hugs and kisses. He remembered the kids. He remembered their names. You know, I mean, it was, I thought, boy, they told me he was really slipping fast. He looks great. Let's take him home and have dinner, you know. But you know, he held the kids, and he laughed, and we talked, and had this beautiful visit. And then we went over to Tamara's parents. They had a condominium there. And it was the Saturday before Easter Sunday. So we dyed Easter eggs, and, you know, the grandparents watched the kids while we snuck over to the store and got some things for an Easter basket for each of them. And that night, you know, we bathed the kids, and they had more egg dye on themselves than was on the eggs. And it had just been a big, happy time. It had been a beautiful family outing, and we got the kids put to bed, and I went and hid their Easter baskets up in the trees in the backyard. I thought, well, they'll never find them here, you know. And the next day was Easter Sunday. Of course, they got up and hunted for the eggs and found the baskets, and all was well. We had Easter dinner and went to services, and then on Monday morning, it was time for me to get back to work. I said, well, we've taken a long weekend. I've got to get back. And we loaded up the car and put the kids in, buckled Griffin in his car seat, got Spencer situated. Tamara sat down by me, and we were ready to leave. And she said, wait just a minute. She said, I want to go in and say goodbye to Mom and Dad one more time. And never underestimate the intuition of a woman or anybody else. I want to say goodbye to Mom and Dad one more time. Now, I'm like, oh, women, you know, we said goodbye, we hugged it, let's go. But she got out of the car, she went and hugged and kissed her mom and dad one more time. We got in the car and we waved, and away we went. And I stopped in town and filled the car with gas, and then we headed northbound on I-15. And I set the cruise control at 75, and away we went. We were in a little SUV, sport utility. And we're driving up the road. In my head, I'm thinking about, okay, I've got these meetings, I've got to get this done, I'm a day behind. You know how it goes. You're driving down the road, and I'm planning what I'm going to do, all about, you know, the mechanics of what had to happen. And it probably wasn't about, I don't know, 30, 40 minutes out of town, an hour, and I looked in my rearview mirror as I'm thinking about all these things that were going to take place. And as I looked in the rearview mirror, I glanced and saw my baby son, Griffin, who was 14 months at the time. He was just learning to walk. He was just up toddling around and learning how to walk. And he was saying a few words like Dad and Ball. And he was sound asleep in his car seat. You know, I looked at him, and all of a sudden I shifted from here, and I almost felt the energies to take me right into my heart. And I saw him. You know, and he was sound asleep. I noticed how his hands were laid, and his little head was in the car seat. He was just as peaceful as could be. And then I glanced and noticed Spencer next to him, and he had gotten Star Wars action figures in his Easter basket. And he was having the grandest lightsaber battle, you know, ever to take place in the universe. And I felt him, and I thought, what a great kid. You know, what a cute kid. All the noises he was making and all that was going on. And then I looked over at my wife, who had also laid her seat back and was sound asleep. And in fact, she still held my hand. She was holding my right hand while I drove with the left hand. And I saw her. I noticed how beautiful she was and how peaceful she was and how lucky I had been. It's been 15 years. It's still sometimes difficult to talk about. But I had this pure moment, just like sitting on the deck, of gratitude, absolute gratitude. My life has been so good. And, of course, my attention back on the road, and away we went. About an hour beyond that, and I don't know, there was reports of crosswinds that were blowing over 100 miles an hour. There was a semi-truck and a van that had gone off the road within a mile of where we did that day. There was reports of a red pickup truck that was driving erratically on the road and causing problems. One of the most painful things for me is I really feel like I dozed off. I think I fell asleep at the wheel and veered to the right, and then I overcorrected to the left. And with the cruise control at that speed, I lost control of the vehicle and it began to roll. Not off the road, but down the road. And the concrete propelled it probably to roll no less than 8 times. And I blacked out for most of that. But when we finally came to a stop, I was very aware that we had had a bad wreck. But my first awareness is I could hear Spencer in the back seat crying. And as a father, it was a cry that he's okay. I mean, he was crying, he was hurt, but he was okay. And I was conscious enough to say to him, it's going to be all right. And then I tried to get to him, and I realized I could not move. As far as I could tell, I was pinned either on the seat or on the floorboard underneath the steering wheel. And I couldn't see. There was so much, blood or whatever in my eyes that I couldn't see. And what I didn't realize at the time is that both of my legs were crushed and shattered. The left one would eventually be amputated. The right one, to this day, still has 6 pins and a plate holding it together, but both of them were crushed and shattered. My hip had been crushed. My back had been broken in 2 places, but never got to the spinal column. My right arm had been completely torn out. I mean, the rotator cuff, there was no muscle left there, and then it was severed underneath it. So I couldn't move that one, and then this shoulder had a AC separation that was severe. And maybe the worst is the seatbelt had come through me and ruptured all my intestines and spilled them out everywhere. And I was in pretty bad shape. And so there I was, and that was maybe the worst hell a man can be in, is I'm listening to my son cry, and I knew I had to get to him, and I couldn't move, and I knew I was slipping fast. But as I heard him cry, then the reality hit me that no one else was crying. Where was the baby? And the reality hit me then that Tamara and Griffin were gone. I mean, I knew it, but I also felt it. I mean, I knew that they had departed, and that was crushing. I mean, I couldn't, there aren't words to explain what that felt like. Half the family's dead. My son's crying, and I'm dying. I knew it. My lungs had begun to collapse. My rib cage had been damaged, and I was losing blood fast, mainly from what had done. The seatbelt cut down through my hip and actually exposed the femoral artery, but didn't cut it. Crazy thing. And the odd thing is I didn't have any head injuries, which was weird. And yet the doctors, when they brought me in, they explained to my younger brother, who had been my best pal, we played football in high school, we played football in college together, we were roommates. And when he got the call, he rushed to the hospital to find me, and he didn't even recognize me. He said, when they brought you in, you were so swollen, you looked like the Michelin Man, is what he said. But he didn't recognize it was me. And the doctors, he said, is he going to, they didn't think I was going to live. But when they realized I didn't have severe head trauma, they figured that I intuitively used my shoulders to protect my head, which they said a lot of athletes, particularly football players, will do, and that's probably why my shoulders were so banged up. But in the end, it was devastating. Now, at the scene of the accident, as I'm slipping away, and I am in this turmoil, all of a sudden the calm returns. That calm gratitude that I experienced just an hour and a half or so down the road. And I literally felt myself raise above the scene. And I was fine. There was no pain. There was some sadness. But it was almost as if, and you know, I've read that, oh, I went down a tunnel of light or all these things. I didn't experience that. For me, it was as simple as being here and, you know, moving over here. It was like stepping through a doorway, and all of a sudden I was in this place of light. In fact, it felt like to me that I was surrounded by a bubble of light. That's what it felt like. And the light was tangible. It was loving. It was pure. It was truth. It was all these things. And then I realized that my wife, who I knew was deceased, was actually there with me in the light. It was like this little bubble surrounded us. Now the odd thing is I felt such peace going from the turmoil of this accident and all of a sudden being lifted in this place of, it's all okay. But my wife was quite upset. She was saying, you can't be here. You can't stay. You can't stay. And I couldn't understand why in such a place of beauty and peace, even though it was just kind of felt like a temporary bubble, why she would be upset. But then I also knew, well, the accident was real. I know that. And then I also realized that Spencer's still in the backseat of that car crying. And she became quite demanding. You can't be here. You've got to go back. And so there I was looking into the eyes of the woman I loved more than life. And yet knowing that my son was back there, who knows in what condition. I knew he was okay, but he was hurt. And I suppose I had a choice, but it didn't feel like a choice. I knew I had to go back. I knew that I had to go back and get my son. And it was as quick as a thought. As soon as I thought, okay, I'm going to go, I was gone. It was a pretty profound goodbye, however. And I hesitate sometimes to share this because many of us have lost loved ones. And not everybody gets to say goodbye. At least I did. And I went back. And the odd thing is I had no sense of time during that transition. I don't know what time elapsed. I don't know what had gone on. What I later learned is that people arrived on the scene of the accident. One of the first to arrive was a doctor who had oxygen in his trailer, who stopped and did some emergency procedures to get air into my lungs. They raced me to Cedar City Hospital with Spencer, my son. They got him freed from the car. And then life flighted us to Salt Lake. Spencer going to Primary Children's Hospital, and then took me to LDS Hospital. I was unaware of all of that. To me, I was in this beautiful place saying goodbye to my wife. But when I consciously left that, I found myself wandering around the hallway of the hospital. And I was still fine. I had no pain. I was wandering at will, but I was encountering the doctors and the nurses and the patients. But when I say encountering them, something was far, far different. I really encountered them. I mean, everybody I saw, every single person, I knew everything about them. I knew everything. I knew their love, I knew their hate, I knew their pain, I knew their joy, I knew their hearts. That's what the title of the book came from. I knew the core of them. I knew every motivation for everything they had ever done and why. And I had this profound sense of love, unconditional love. it was like seeing one of my brothers. It's like, oh, I love you. I wanted to embrace them. I wanted to go and embrace them all. And they were all walks of life. I mean, from the heroin addict to the, beloved mother over here. I mean, everybody, but I loved them. And they were perfect. And I saw them. And I knew them. And I knew that we were all connected. And I knew profound things about their lives. It was really, really strange. The toughest thing about writing about it or talking about it is there really aren't words. There aren't words to explain or describe what I knew. But it was awesome. It was awesome to feel that connected and know that we really were one. And it was all okay. And as I wandered through the hospital, experiencing this and knowing, I mean, I'd come from a Christian background, but I thought, this is how God sees us. This is how He knows us. This is how He loves us. I knew it, regardless. And there was this unconditional love about it, until I finally encountered a man laying on the gurney there that I didn't feel anything from. I thought, well, that's odd. And so I stepped closer, only to realize I was looking at my body. That was me. That was my body. And that was a bit striking because I didn't recognize me either, except I knew it. My body was in such a mess. Such a mess. But I did recognize it. I knew it was me. I knew I was looking at what was me, but I was here. I was not my body. And I didn't want to get back here. I wanted to go back to that place of peace. I mean, I looked at the wreck that had been what I thought I was, and yet was just the vehicle that I was traveling in. But I did have a profound sense of knowing. And these downloads would come. These downloads of just knowing. And I realized, I went down to the Baha'i temple this morning, but what came to me is, as I looked at my body, is that I was told, that is your temple. And it shifted this whole meaning of temples, and I remembered the biblical, Jesus, the Christ, saying, in 3 days I'll raise this temple, or Paul saying, no, you're not, you're the temple of God, and God dwells in you. These things from my childhood came up, and I thought, that is my temple. Oh, and then I saw the symbols. We go into the temple to receive enlightenment. Oh, I go into my body to receive all these beautiful lessons of life that will teach me everything I came here to learn, so I can go home and, it was this complete symbol of my body, and there was this profound sense of sadness at the state of my body, and that knowing I did have to get back in it because I wasn't finished. And then again, as soon as I thought I've got to be in the body, bam, then I was in the body. And then the pain, both physically and emotionally, because the guilt hit. I was driving the car, and that stayed with me for a long time. I was driving the car. Did I do this? Am I responsible for this? How do I get over this? It was tough. And I was ventilated. They had a respirator down me to breathe for me. My legs were both crushed. I couldn't move any of the extremities. They had this hand tied down because apparently I did keep trying to drag all the needles and things out. But I learned a lot about being still. Have you ever heard the term "be still"? And no. I couldn't go anywhere. I had no choice. I had to just be still. I suppose had I been in a different situation, I could have talked to someone. I could have run. I could have gone and beat up a heavy bag. I had to lay there. I couldn't even speak. And I had a strange sense of almost being part in the spirit world and part here. Because I'd have these profound, strange dreams or visitations. I was on a lot of morphine, and some people have said, well, it was the drugs, but I know what I experienced. And I actually had another conversation with my deceased wife. And this time she came with the baby. And she let me know strange details. I mean, somebody found a gold ring. She wanted me to give that special necklace to her sister-in-law. She wanted her brother to have this pen. She wanted, I mean, just details, strange things. She wanted to be buried with the baby, put us together. They were together when she came. Now, here I am experiencing all of this spiritually. My body's laid out practically comatose. I mean, I wasn't able to, do anything. And there's no accidents in life. This is what's funny. In that time frame, they were making the funeral arrangements for Tamara and Griffin. And her parents wanted to take them clear back down into southern Utah to bury them there on a family plot. They didn't think I was going to make it. They kept telling my family, he'll probably pass too, so maybe you should wait to do the funeral until all three of them are gone. Spencer was doing fine. He had already been released from the hospital. He had broken his arm and had bruised his ribs, but he basically walked away from the accident. But nobody knew what to do, because they didn't know if I was going to stick around, but enough time had elapsed, they figured we'd better make the funeral plans for the others, and they were in that process. Well, the insurance company came forward and said, you're not in the network of your insurance coverage. This is what my family, my older brother's a cop and my younger brother's an attorney. They're both in the law, I'm the outlaw. And my younger brother was going to sue everybody. He said, this is ridiculous. You cannot transfer him to another hospital. And the insurance demanded that be done. And my older brother just shook his head. He was an EMT, and he said, I don't know how you're going to do it. The ambulance crew showed up, and they said, we're not moving him anywhere. There's no way. And they had to bring in a life flight crew to move me 3 miles to the other hospital. But here's the beauty of the story. Where everybody else thought it was an absolute catastrophe, they cannot do this. In the process of transferring me, they took the respirator out. And I was able to speak. And I said, I've got to tell you what's been going on. Tamara wants to be buried here. She wants to be buried with the baby. This is what I was able to share a message for the services that they did. And had they not taken the respirator out to move me, none of that would have ever happened. So when you think your life is falling apart, it's probably falling into place. There's a reason for everything. And it turned out beautifully. The services were beautiful. They buried Tamara and Griffin very near our home, where Spencer could go after school if he wanted to, and just feel close to Mom and to his little brother, and me too. I mean, I could go there. And it was very important. I knew they weren't there. I had said goodbye. I had seen them in that other realm, and they were perfectly fine. But there was something about where they were buried. I mean, it was like that. Those were the arms that held me. I wanted to be there. And we'd go and lay on the lawn, Spencer and I, right on the burial site, and just, it was important the day that we're there. Not that others weren't grieving too, but it was very lucky for me to be able to have that happen. So there's no accidents. It's happened for a reason. I was in the hospital for almost 6 months. I had 18 surgeries as they put me back together. I had profound experiences in the hospital. The veil became thinner for me. That's what I call it, is the veil. I sensed things. Having seen people like I did, judgment went out the window. I mean, there was just no reason anymore to judge anybody. And, I began to heal. I had complications in the hospital. I kept throwing pulmonary embolisms, blood clots, and they would lodge in my lungs. And I had severe pneumonia anyway from laying on my back so long. And I would go from, ICU to surgical recovery, back to ICU, and finally got into rehab, the rehabilitation area, and threw 2 more blood clots, which landed me back in ICU. It was quite a crazy scene. But perhaps the most profound experience I had was at the end of my hospital stay. I mean, I was back in rehabilitation wing. They were doing the last surgery on my shoulder before they sent me home. They still had to do some colostomy work and all that, and all of that was taken down. I've healed in amazing ways, and I want to give a nod to the hospital staff. We have some hospital chaplains here. I had a chaplain probably saved my life when I was in the hospital. I'm not going to get into that because I want to leave plenty of time for questions. But But the hospital staff was so kind, so caring, so loving about the way they went. And being in a state was, I could feel it. I knew when somebody came in the room with love and light, and when somebody came in to just do their job. And I was very aware of that. But so many of them showed up in such love, and it was great. But at the end of this hospital stay, and they'd repaired the shoulder, and I was going to be going home. They said, within the week, we'll be sending you home. And so I was very excited, but I was also anxious. What's going to happen? I mean, I'm going to be in a wheelchair. I couldn't use my right arm at that point. Will I ever learn to walk again? I didn't know what would happen, And it was odd because I was finally sleeping on my side. I laid on my back so long in the hospital, I'd rubbed the back of my head bald. And my brothers had a ball with that, that my head was bald on the back. And I've got to mention my brothers, too. They practically lost their jobs to just be with me. They'd come and sit for the night. They'd hold my hand. They would talk to me. They would tease me. They'd do whatever they could. That bond that we had developed as children was just welded and solidified as adults because they showed up in such a way for me that, anyway, men were meant to be brothers. They were meant to look out for each other. And we spent so much time fighting and competing and trying to outdo each other. I used to fight with my brothers. We'd hit each other till we bled in the mouths and everything else. And yet here they were holding my hands, And it was a beautiful thing. And my younger brother was with me on this particular night. I was finally sleeping on my side. He was going to stay up and talk with me as long as I wanted to talk before he went home. And I fell sound asleep. Very sound asleep, and I had what I can only call was a dream or a vision. But as I faded into that sleep, all of a sudden I was back in that place. That light bubble, that thing that I had felt, I was back home. That's the only word I can make for it. I was home. And I was elated. I was running about and just so joyful to be there. And then part of that dream was a corridor. There was this long corridor. So I made my way down the corridor until I saw at the end of it was a crib. And I raced to the crib and I looked in it, and that was my little son Griffin. And he was perfectly fine. He was sleeping. And I sensed that thing that I had kind of experienced in the car, except this was so much more real. It was super real. And I looked at him and I saw the details, his eyelashes. I swept him up and I just held him. And I began to weep in the joy that here was my little boy and he was fine and I was holding him. I was holding him. I'm like, I get to say goodbye to him too. And in all that gratitude and in all that joy of being there with him, I felt a presence come up behind me. And here's where words really get hard. This being that came up behind me was so powerful and so eternal and so wise and yet so loving and so absolutely personal. And I knew I was standing in the presence of what I call God. I didn't even dare turn around. I stood there weeping, holding my little boy. And I felt this being come up behind me. And as I held my son, my divine Creator held me. And I wept. And he actually said some things to me, but it wasn't what he said. And I say he, this was a male energy for me, and yet I'm all about mom and dad. That's what I say when I speak of God, is mom and dad up there. But this was a male energy. And all of a sudden that download came again. I knew everything. I knew everything. I felt as if I was as eternal as he was. And I saw my whole life. It was so personal. I saw everything in my life. I saw the joy, the hardships. I saw the wreck. I saw the crash. I didn't see it. I just knew. I mean, I didn't have to witness it or watch it. I saw how everything in my life, even the stupid things, even the dumb things I had done, even the things that I knew were wrong and I did them anyway. I mean, all those things, I saw how they served me. As I was in the arms of this divine creator and felt how loving. He was saying, see how much I love you. See how you got to have the experience. See how even the wreck is all part of your perfect path. It was all created for you. I felt as if the whole universe was supporting me on this incredible journey, which is an illusion, by the way. That's real. This is the weird, crazy dream. That is real. And as I stood there in the realm of that divinity, I knew that I was divine, that we all are, that we're all part of it. And I'd come from a Christian background of heaven and hell, and God was going to judge me, and he was probably going to be mad. There was no judgment. There was only absolutely unconditional love. And I needed that because I carried that guilt of I was driving the car. You know, did I kill half my family by overcorrecting? And yet to be in the arms of absolute perfection and feel and know that I was perfect and that all of it was perfect. That there were no mistakes, there were no accidents. That all of it was part of a perfect divine plan in perfect order. And it was done for me so that I could come here and learn what I came to learn. It was beautiful, and it shifted everything. And I realized that I had a choice. In fact, part of this experience is that God told me that I could choose to feel like a victim. I could choose to be put upon and feel like my family had been ripped away from me. Or he said, I'll give you the opportunity right now to give your son to me. And in giving him to me, you'll never feel like he was taken away from you again. And in that perfect place of peace and knowing, I was able to kiss my little boy, put him back in the crib. And I've wondered since then, how could I do that? I mean, you know, why didn't I just hold on to him and never let go? And for a while I was angry. Even after this experience, I was angry at my wife. How could you leave me like this? But I've come to realize they loved me enough. They loved me enough to leave me because they showed up as teachers. Sometimes when people leave young, they come with a very profound message. And there's an agreement that was made in the realms that we don't always understand. But they show up as teachers so that we either become brokenhearted or we have to reach deep to know. And they raised their hand and said, I'll do it. And I'll do it for you because I love you that much. Life has gone in a beautiful way for me. Coming home from the hospital was interesting. I didn't know what to do. I was in an electric wheelchair. This arm was bound up. My left arm would handle a little... I looked like that weird doctor in The Nightmare Before Christmas that would, you know, I had to put, you know, one leg was cut off above the knee, the other one was all bound up. And Spencer, my son, my beautiful oldest son, he'd been coming to the hospital to see me, and he was fine there in the hospital bed and visiting with me there, but I was now coming onto his turf. I mean, what was it going like at the grocery store is, you know, here's, you know, the monster dad with Spencer tagging along. And I actually went to my brother's house. They even took me into their home, my younger brother and my older brother too for a time. You know, I had to have home health care and therapy and all that stuff. But my brothers came to get me. And I was really worried about Spencer and how he was going to handle this. He's like, what's he going to think? Is he going to be okay with this? I was the dad that would throw him in the air and catch him and toss him over my shoulder and run up the stairs and tickle him and put him to bed, and now I couldn't even stand up, you know. But my brothers came and got me, and sorry, I get emotional. I'm sniveling all over you all and everything else. But my brothers came and got me to take me to his house, which was the next step towards home. And as I worried about him all the way there, my brothers loaded me up, put the wheelchair in, we arrived home, and they had built a ramp for me to get up into the house and all these things. And they lifted me from the car. They had to lift me and put me in the chair. And I could see Spencer looking in the window watching this, And then they started the chair, and the door swung open, and out came Spencer. At the time, he was 7. Oh, bless your heart. Give her a hand. I love you. Anyway, I'm in the chair, the wheelchair. Spencer comes running out, and he ran toward me, and he ran right past me. And I thought, well, yeah, it's too much for him to handle. And so I thought, well, we'll proceed into the house. And I did. And as I got to the ramp, I just checked one more time to see where he was. And I realized he'd run across the street, and he was knocking on all the neighbors' doors. And he was saying, come out, my dad's home. Come out and see my dad's home. And, he circled around and made his route, and he came and jumped up on my lap, but just about killed me. Because he put his arms around me, and he was just 7. And I said, are you going to be okay with this? I mean, I'm going to be like this for a while. And he and I still laugh about his exchange. He said, Dad, if you were nothing but a puddle of blood, I'd still love you. He threw his arms around me, and he was a great strength to me as a youngster, as a little boy, as we transitioned and came home. But if there was one message, my glimpse into the hereafter was very brief. It was very short, but I learned so much that words don't do it justice. When I come into a situation like this, I just have to say, let the energy teach them, because I can't. There's that famous saying that says, when the student is ready, the teacher appears. I'm not the teacher. What you feel in your hearts is the teacher. Some might call it the spirit, some might call it energy, but that's what teaches us. That's where we learn. And I learned a lot that way. Communicating it is a difficult thing. But it was a beautiful journey. I have no fear of death. I am absolutely unafraid of death. It was a beautiful process. Like I say, it was like stepping from here to there. Life is sometimes what hurts. Death was easy. And then also too, I realize this is IANDS. This is all about near-death experiences, but the life experience may be far more important. I spoke of my brothers. Gosh, what can we do to love people in our families? To reach out to the people who are closest to us. And just do those things and say those things that matter. Because you don't know. You just don't know what tomorrow or the next moment might bring. So I learned to make every moment sacred. It is. Every moment is sacred. And if we can live it that way and love that way and reach out that way, we'll change the world. That's the interesting thing. I used to think that, I'll die and go to heaven and then I'll be okay and be happy. And it was happy. But in having that process, I realized that you don't have to die or leave the body or whatever to know these things. You can experience them by walking up to a total stranger and just looking into their soul and feeling them and knowing that that's my brother or that's my sister. And this profound prayer that my greatest master said about thy will be done on earth as in heaven, it's up to us. We can literally create heaven here on earth if we'll just let the judgments go and start loving each other in a way that makes a difference. And I'm not on a platform here and I have no agenda, but it was all about love. And it was about unconditional love. Not only for others, but for ourselves. The guilt I experienced for what had happened and the self-judgment that I went through about how could have I changed it and why this or that. It was only my own judgments. God had no judgment of it. No one had any judgment of it. My deceased family members had no judgment of it. It was part of the perfect process. They knew that. They were holding the space for me to have this life. I've remarried. We've adopted 2 little boys, and that was a beautiful process. That's all coming out in book 2, by the way. The publishers asked me to do book 2 now. And that was profound. I mean, I had a complete deja vu when I met my second wife as I did when I met the first one. I saw her, and I thought I was losing my mind. I thought, okay, I'm really too lonely. This is really bad. How can I be feeling this way? And yet the hero of the whole story is her. She was sent as a gift and as an angel to me. And the odd thing is she has more spiritual interactions with my first wife than I do. And I don't understand that. They team up on me all the time, and it's awful. And then these 2 beautiful boys showed up in our life, and we adopted 2 little boys. And oddly enough, Zachary, my middle son, who's 13 now, he was 14 months old. He was the same age when we adopted him as Griffin was when I lost him. So I got to pick up and move that. And Aiden is just, he's enough to keep the whole family laughing. And, so what we feel we've lost is always returned. There's this divine law of compensation. And we don't understand it, and we don't get it. And I'll never say, well, I'm okay now. I'll never get over what happened. I'll never get over it, but I got used to it. And I learned to see the gifts in life. There was a moment for me after the accident. In fact, we had already moved home. Spencer was back in school. Life was moving on. And I still couldn't get up the stairs very well, and his bedroom was up on the top level. And, so I hugged him goodnight, and I sent him up the stairs. But here I was watching my little boy who had turned 8. He was 8 years old at the time. And I just thought, how's he ever going to know? How am I ever going to do this by myself? He'll forget his mom. He'll forget what a wonderful person she was. And I, once I knew he was in bed, I just sobbed. I just broke down and sobbed and cried to God, saying, why? How am I going to do this? And I knew there was no real answer. I just was crying out to the only being that I could possibly feel knew where I was. And I don't often hear voices. I do hear voices from time to time, but on this occasion, as I poured out my heart, saying, how am I ever going to do it? God spoke to me. I heard the voice, as audible as me in this microphone. And he only said 2 words. He said, choose joy. And then I had that recollection. It's a choice. It's a choice. And it's up to me. He loves me. I could have been strung out on the street, I guess, based on the pain I had. Or I could be there doing my best to raise my son. He loved me either way. But it was up to me to choose the joy. And so, as we wrap up, and we're going to take minutes for questions and answers, the monologue is, I get bored with it. I love the dialogue much better. But do that. Choose joy in your life. Make the choice. Reach out to others. Love a stranger. It makes all the difference, and I think it changes the whole vibration. But thank you so much for having me and allowing me to come and share this. It's a safe place. It's still hard for me to talk about it, but I feel your energy, and that propels me to feel like I can share things that are very dear. So thank you very much. Do you want a mic on the questions? Okay. If you have a question, just stand up and shout it out.
Ask the question again.
Okay, I'll ask it again.
Yep, paraphrase it.
What a wonderful story. Really, thank you very much. Really beautiful.
Oh,
So I think everybody understands their personal paths and their personal challenges and things like that. But how about the global stuff? The war, the global climate crisis. Did God give you any indication on those things?
I've read near-death experiences where they're shown the future and they see all these things. What I learned from it, and again, my experience was so personal and so intimate, but I learned that it was literally up to me. If I want to change those things, then I get to do something about it. you know, and if I want to create something different, then I'm the first step to create it. It's Gandhi's old be the change you want to see in the world. Because there are catastrophes. We have raped the planet. You know, these things aren't working. And yet, when I stood in that divine place, I knew that everything was in perfect order, except us. You know, we get to change it. We're in such good hands. I don't feel doomsday about any of this. We're in such good hands, and the perfect situations are served up for us to learn. We're only here to learn. That's the only reason we're here, is to learn. And so all of these catastrophes are to teach us, or to give us the opportunity to make a different choice. And it happens on an individual level, because individually we will change the global scene of things. But it takes that choice. Yes, in the back.
How is your, what all are the gifts that are, besides being downloaded the information at the time, are you intuitive now, and how does that play into your coaching? And
Good question.
What gifts do I have now? What happened? What did I come back, besides just getting the downloads at the time? I do have gifts. And yet we all have gifts. You know, there's nothing, Marianne Williamson said, in God's eyes, everybody's special and nobody's special. What I experience, however, is I still feel people. I still see them from time to time in that way that I did out of the body, not as powerfully. I've become to know the body is the veil. That's what kind of holds us back. When I was out of the body, there was none of that there. I have profound dreams, very vivid dreams. I've shared the one with Griffin, and I'll be brief about this. Griffin has come to me in recent years, and it was an odd but very vivid dream, or vision, if you will. I was sitting in the front seat of my father's pickup truck in the dream, and I looked down, and I was wearing one of those snap pantsuits that you can change the diaper really easily on, and I realized that, well, here I am. I'm like a year old, sitting in the front seat of my dad, and I remembered. I'm like, I remember this. And I looked at my silly little shoes, you know, the little toddler shoes you have, and I was sitting there in the dream saying, wow, I'm me, but I remember this. I literally remember being here. And we were on the farm, you know, we had the big farm, and so in the dream, the cows were all pressing up on the truck and licking the windows. They wanted to get to the feed that was in the back of it. And as this child, I remember being very frightened. But it was like I was reliving. I'm like, I remember this. I remember being here, and I was worried, and I was scared. And all of a sudden, the cows all shoot away, and here came my dad and hopped in the truck. And, you know, he comforted me and held me. And I remembered it. And then in the dream, I turned, and there was a grown young man. I don't know the age, 20 maybe. But I knew it was Griffin. I knew it was my little son that I'd said goodbye to, but in this instance, he was a grown young man. And he didn't speak to me, but he communicated. And he said, I wanted you to remember that, because I want you to know I'll never forget being your little boy. And I'll never forget what it was like to have you as my dad. And then he embraced me. And then he did speak to me. He said, I have a message for you. And I, you know, in the dream, I'm like, oh, boy, listen up. Here comes a message from beyond. And he was taller than me. He laid his face on my head. And he said, Dad, I'm proud of you. That was the message. It was not a big, profound, you know, that's the funny thing. I mean, it's the simple things in life that are so meaningful, that are so powerful, that are so big. And so I do have profound dreams, and I do have symbolic things. I see symbols. You know, the Baha'i temple, and looking at the symbols in that, and looking into, you know, sacred Egyptian stuff and all these things. I see symbols far more clearly now than I ever used to. And I suppose that's a gift too, but we all have gifts. There's nothing special about me any more special than anyone else.
What do you mean? You mean you interpret symbols personally?
Yeah, I interpret them. I see simple things and say, oh, wow. I mean, for instance, biblically, I've loved studying the Bible, you know, in my life. And I thought it ironic that, you know, Muslim, Jewish, Christian, we all have this Adam and Eve story. And this is something that my deceased wife kind of came back and hinted to me at. And whenever she comes, I feel her. I don't see her, but I feel her, and then I get all this information. And she's always very joyful, which is good for me, because in that painful goodbye, she was not joyful. But now when I feel her, she's very, very joyful. And she came home with a secret. She's like, it was like, guess what I found out today? That's kind of the energy it was. And she recounted to me the Adam and Eve story. And this might be strange, but I feel moved to share this. I typically don't, but she said, do you realize that Adam and Eve are both within you? You have a male energy, you have a female energy. And this whole story of Eve was not about a fall or a mistake. It was about and this was very personal, she said, your Eve is your body, it's your flesh, it's your sensuality, it's your groundedness, it's your desire. That's your Eve, that's your feminine energy. Your male energy is this connectedness, this knowing, this connection to God. But what she was so elated about, we grew up in a Mormon community where it was kind of felt that the women should submit